To begin, we're going to cut up one onion into medium pieces. For this recipe, I'm using crimini mushrooms, however, you can use any mushrooms you like. Next, cut up your mushrooms into small pieces, and this will mock as your fake ground beef. On medium heat, add about a teaspoon of oil to a pan and add your onions. For this recipe, we're going to cook down the onions until they're very brown. This will add flavor into the meatballs. So you'll see over time they'll begin to cook down and get softer. You don't have to burn your onions, however, I kind of like the flavor that it adds to the meatballs. For instance, if you wanted to stop cooking the onions right here, that's fine. Once the onions are cooked, place them aside and then cook your mushrooms. All mushrooms have a little bit of water in them, so I like to cook out the water before I use them. This will take about 15-20 minutes or so depending on the mushroom that you're using. So as you can see, this is the water releasing from the mushrooms. I'm just letting it cook down. And there'll be less and less water the more you cook it. This is just about done, so now I'm just letting the mushrooms cook so some pieces can get a little crispy. Okay, now the mushrooms are cooked and some pieces are a little bit crispy, so that's perfect. Add beans too. If you have a food processor, use that, but I had a blender, so just work with what you got. The whole point is to mix everything up. Then we're gonna add our sauteed onions. Blend this until it's a smooth consistency. If you're using a food processor, you want it to be a little bit chunky. I blended mine a little too long, and if I could go back, I would do it a little less, but it still came out fine. So next we're gonna add our mushrooms that we cooked earlier and just mix everything together. Then add about 2 or 3 dashes of liquid smoke. If you want more smoky flavor, then add more. Then add your seasonings and continue to mix. The binder for this recipe will be Ritz crackers, and yes, they are vegan. I like to use them because they add just, this certain flavor that I like. You can use breadcrumbs if you don't want to use Ritz. Measure about 1 cup of Ritz crackers that are crushed and set aside, and measure half a cup of flour and set aside. Add the Ritz crackers little by mixing up the meatball mixture to make sure it is well incorporated. Then continue with the same method for the flour. If your mixture is still sticky or doesn't form into a ball when you're mixing it, just add more Ritz crackers. So once your mixture resembles something like this, you're ready to begin forming the balls. Measure out a tablespoon of the mixture into your hands and form into little balls, then place aside on a baking sheet. On medium heat, begin to cook your meatballs and add a decent amount of oil into the pan. As the meatballs cook, flip them on each side to ensure that they're evenly cooked. I cooked each side about 2 to 3 minutes. I like my meatballs with a little bit of crunch, so I left them on the pan a little longer. However, you can take them out once you see that they're medium brown. So these are the cooked meatballs. I placed them aside back on the baking sheet because we're going to put them in the oven at 350 for about 20 to 25 minutes. So once they were done, I took the meatballs out of the oven and started to assemble my meatball sub. So I was being lazy this day and ended up buying my tomato sauce. However, if you want to be fancy, you could always get creative and make your own tomato sauce. It tastes better, it's fresher, and you know what you're putting in it. So I added some vegan mozzarella cheese to my sandwich, and you can melt it or you can have it cold. I was hungry, so I just had it cold.